Hello, City Church, friends and family and loved ones. It's good to be back with you. See, we started a conversation earlier this week by asking the question, now what? Today, I want to continue that discussion with the goal of finishing out that conversation during our Sunday service tomorrow. See, what we did is we looked at the exciting thing of coming off of Easter. We spent a week of telling stories, of celebrating. We talked about Palm Sunday. We talked about Good Friday. We talked about Easter. We talked about what happened directly after. We talked about the idea of now what? That a good story puts you in a position of you ask the question, now what? What happens next? Now, we know that there are many things that happened after Jesus died. After he was crucified, we know that there were many things that happened. But they still didn't answer the question, now what? We talked about on Monday where Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene and showed himself to her. And she went and she ran and told others. There were other things that happened. One of the most exciting things for me, when I was younger, when I was a child, went to Catholic school, and we spent so many time telling these stories, so much time telling them, and I loved them. And I can remember how I felt during those times, hearing these stories, thinking about, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I always asked, now what? Some of my favorite stories I just kind of want to share with you of what happened directly after Jesus was crucified, leading up to this now what moment. The first one we find in the book of Matthew, chapter 27, verses number 52 and 53. It says this, "What's more, tombs were opened up, and many bodies of believers asleep in their graves were raised. After Jesus' resurrection, they left the tombs, entered the holy city, and appeared to many." That's amazing. Think about that. That is a powerful story, that things were so shifted in the spirit. There was so much power released when Jesus raised, that the dead themselves came up out of the grave. They went to the holy city, and we know this because they appeared to people. And can you imagine somebody that had died 10 years previous, had risen and came up to you and said, there was so much power released, here I am? That's amazing. As a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old in school, when they were telling us this story, I couldn't stop thinking about this, that, wow, what? I couldn't imagine all of these people walking that were supposed to be dead, raising from the dead because of this happening. I still, to this day, can't get over it. Still doesn't answer the question of now what. One of the other things that I remember as a young child was the story of Thomas. That's found in John chapter 20, verses 24 through 29. And this is what it says. "Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said, 'Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand in his side, I will not believe.' A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them, and said, 'Peace be with you.' Then he said to Thomas, 'Put your finger here. See my hands. Raise out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe.' Thomas said to him, 'My Lord and my God.' Then Jesus told him, 'Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed.'" I couldn't get over this story the first time I'd heard it. I can remember, it's been more than 40 years ago that I heard this story for the first time, and I still remember this part of, first of all, if Jesus is standing before you, how can you doubt that? I could never understand that. And then secondly, kind of gross, he wants to stick his hands in the nail hole. He wants to put his hand in the side and prove. I don't know if that's what I want to do, but this is the only way that Thomas would believe. And Jesus told him, "Here, do it. I'll show you." That's amazing. Another thing is that's phenomenal with this story is it says that the doors were locked. They were in the room, doors were locked, and Jesus just showed up. I mean, I always wondered, did he walk through a wall? Did he unlock a locked door? Did he just kind of like Star Trek move, like teleport in? Just all of a sudden he's there? Like, what was that? There's so many questions about this that just make it such a good story. But you know what? It still doesn't answer our question of now what. Another great story is, and this was actually before the Thomas thing, is when Jesus appeared to the disciples. It says on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them. There's that thing again where doors were locked, Jesus just came in and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. And Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. For if you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." So Jesus breathes on them, and they're filled with the Holy Spirit. So he just shows up. He says, "Peace, and let me give you a gift." See, that's in a key part of what's happening. That is a key part of what's happening because that's starting to lead us to the now what. Now we know that Jesus. We sort of hear stories of Jesus cooking fish and talking to the disciples and telling them to go reach the world. And that might be the answer to our question. That might be, I think that's it. I think that might be the answer to now what. I would invite you to make sure you do not miss tomorrow's service at City Church because we will settle in on this answer of now what.